Sleep disturbance is rampant in our society. Insomnia affects 1/4 of US adults, but sleep disturbance that doesn't qualify as insomnia affects a much larger group of people. Not getting enough sleep is detrimental to your health in so many ways, and it is due to the fact that the brain, the immune system, and sleep are all interconnected. So if you are not sleeping properly, that can contribute to increased risk of depression, cardiovascular disease, inflammatory disease, and Alzheimer's disease. Today I want to dive into the science behind how the interconnectedness of these three systems is affected by sleep disturbance, and bring that home to you, the viewer. If you are suffering from sleep disturbance or insomnia, help you understand why sleep is so important and the importance of correcting your sleep so that we can correct the loops that may have become misaligned due to your sleep disturbance. I'm Dr. John Bartemus, and I'm putting the pieces together to help you live a life at optimal. We all understand that sleep is important. If you don't believe it, then go 48 hours without sleep and see how well you function. You probably won't even need to go that long before you notice cognitive imbalance, fatigue, maybe increased pain, etc. Well, how much sleep is the right amount of sleep? That answer varies and should vary depending on the person we're talking about. But in general, the research uses 7 hours of sleep as the research normal. And from there, they define abnormal. Abnormal sleep in terms of not enough is sleep less than 5 hours in duration. Abnormal sleep in terms of too much is sleep greater than 9 hours. In today's video, we're going to talk mostly about sleep disturbance, sleep deprivation, and insomnia, so the less than 5 hours variety of sleep dysfunction. And the research is clear that even one night of sleep disturbance, one night of less than 5 hours of sleep, has inflammatory impact on you. And then if you stack nights together a few days, over weeks, over months, the risk and adverse effects go up. So let's dive into how this happens. Now, as stated in the introduction, sleep, the immune system, and the brain are all integrated together. You can't impact one without impacting the others. And what is one major input that affects all three? You nailed it, stress. And if you want to learn more about stress physiology than what we're covering today, check out my functional nugget number 453, entitled Stress and the Gut, where I dive into stress physiology, stress and inflammation, etc. But you nailed it. Stress is a big time driver of dysfunction in sleep, in immunity, and in cognitive processing. And stress implicates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA-axis for short, and the sympathetic nervous system. This is the highway that is connecting immune system and sleep, and these two areas begin in the brain. So the three are interconnected. Now we need to take one leg at a time just to keep it sane. But first we want to understand the benefits of normal sleep before we can talk about abnormal sleep. Normal sleep promotes optimal anti-infection immunity, specifically the antiviral response. If you are sleeping optimally, that sleep is promoting a Th1 immune response, which is the antiviral response, and you are your best killer of viruses at night. So we require sufficient sleep so we can perform optimal surveillance and clearance of viruses. Now, if we lose sleep, that suppresses our antiviral defenses and promotes infection. Studies on over 23,000 individuals with sleep deprivation found that those people with sleep deprivation had an increased risk or an increased occurrence of infection in the last 30 days. So the immune sleep piece is huge. Now, sleep disturbance can occur from stress. And in our society, the stress is typically not physically real in terms of a tiger chasing us. It's more social stress. So social stress, especially chronic social stress, leads to sleep disturbance. And so if your sleep is disturbed, the sleep disturbance leads to blunted immune response. And that blunted immune response will lead to increased inflammation and risk of inflammatory diseases, as well as decreased Th1 response, which is our antiviral response. And along with that decrease in a Th1 response, we also have an increase in a Th2 response. The Th2 response feeds back to further promote the stress response. The Th2 response is what's active in allergies as well. So that's one piece of the puzzle. As you learned in functional nugget number 453, as the stress becomes chronic and becomes a loop, we can have glucocorticoid resistance, which basically could be restated as cortisol resistance. So we lose the anti-inflammatory effect of cortisol, and then the sympathetic nervous system, the catecholamines, are driving the pro-inflammatory side of the equation, so we become net inflamed. We lose our anti-inflammatory capacity, our inflammation goes up and out of control, and now we're at a higher risk of inflammatory diseases. And we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. Now, what about the brain? Well, if the brain, well, let's go back here. The HPA-axis and the sympathetic nervous system occur in the brain. And as covered in video 453, the sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight response, that stress response. Well, we also have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is what opposes the sympathetic nervous system. So they oppose each other. It's kind of like your biceps and your triceps. You're not going to flex both at the same time. You can't. You have to be in one or the other. So if sympathetic is dominating, we're inhibiting the vagus and our rest and digest side of things. If vagus is winning, then we're going to inhibit that stress response. Well, sleep disturbance is going to lead to inhibited vagal function and increased sympathetic nervous system function, which again inhibits vagus. So this promotes inflammation. Studies show that the higher sympathetic nervous system response at night in people with sleep disturbance carries forward into a higher response during the day. So if you wake up and you don't feel rested, if you wake up and you just say, oh crap, another day, you're already starting in that heightened fight or flight response, and you're promoting inflammation, promoting tissue damage. So sleep is going to be key there. That heightened sympathetic nervous system response affects brain because now our cognitive processing isn't great. That's going to promote anxiety, going to promote short-term memory loss, and long-term could promote Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is brain inflammation. So if we tie it all together, sleep disturbance increases inflammation. The inflammation increases what's called microglial activation in the brain. And when we have increased microglial activation, there's increased brain inflammation, which promotes Alzheimer's. If we have sleep deprivation and we have increased sympathetic nervous system firing, then it's another way to increase brain inflammation, and that can lead to depression symptoms. If you have a pre-existing inflammatory disorder, that can lead to sleep deprivation, which leads to depression symptoms. So you could start the circle from anywhere on this chart. You could start the loop from anywhere on this chart. And forgive me for the lines everywhere, but this is how interconnected it is. This is why you can't do just one thing without affecting all the other things. So understand, if you're not sleeping and you're trying to be healthy, it's not going to work. If you have an inflammatory disorder, whether it's autoimmune disease, whether it's chronic infection, whether it's depression, whether it's Alzheimer's, you aren't going to optimize your health until you get your sleep in control. In fact, studies show that correcting the sleep deprivation can be as beneficial to the person's health as diet and exercise. So you can't say, oh, I'm eating well, why aren't I getting better? That's just one piece of the puzzle. If you're eating well but sleeping less than 5 hours a night, this loop is still going and you're not going to reach the optimal health that you desire until you continue to eat well, but then also correct the sleep and anything else that's going on in your physiology. How do you optimize sleep? Well, there's multiple ways, and it's probably going to take multiple things. One, you have to find any of the sticks in your spokes physiologically that exist. So if there's an underlying inflammatory disease, that has to be addressed. If you have blood sugar issues, that has to be addressed. Thyroid, hormones, all kinds of things. Metabolically, you have to address those pictures. Stress. Stress needs to be addressed. Remember, the research shows social stress is what's driving it in our society. So, are you in a job that you hate? Are you exposed to relationships that are unhealthy that you shouldn't stay in? Those things need to be addressed. And if you need help with that, therapy is one option. And then in addition to that, sleep hygiene has to be addressed. If you don't know the proper ways to sleep, how your room setup should be, devices, things like that, then cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, may be very beneficial to you. And then brain. We need to optimize brain. So things like relaxation response, meditation, Tai Chi, these are things that the research is showing are very powerful in optimizing cognitive processing, decreasing brain inflammation, and promoting improvements in sleep. It's a whole picture view. You have to address the whole picture. Finding a clinician that does that in the conventional medical model is going to be tough. So you want to search for a clinician trained in functional medicine, whether that's a medical doctor, an osteopath, a chiropractor, a naturopath, a nurse practitioner. They're out there. You have to seek them out, work with them to figure out your specific puzzle, which of these nodes are involved, and create a strategy unique to you to address them so that you can live and sleep at optimal.